Good afternoon, everyone. I am very happy to welcome you in this session, How to Stay a Critical Artist When Working with the Industry, as a part of Ars Electronica Festival Garden, UK. To welcome you in this session, How to Stay a Critical Artist When we will have a discussion of 1 hour, which is supported by the University for the Creative Arts, UCA in the UK, and the START ecosystem. So I will just present myself very quickly while you are joining. I am Aurélie Delaterre, a senior project manager at Innova, an innovation consultancy based in Portugal, and coordinator of the START ecosystem project. I am specialized in art tech collaborations, and I have recently managed the Start in Motion program, a 6-month acceleration and mentoring program designed exclusively for art-driven projects that want to go to the market, where Vixx, Epoch, and Epoch, the 3 projects that we present today, we have today with us, have been supported. So to introduce our topic, I would say that when we think of a perfect match, we don't necessarily associate artist and industry. In fact, we can consider that they are opposite because artists have a critical point of view and many times subversive visions of the world. They have at heart to produce products and services that are ethical, sustainable, human-centered, and that offer protection to their users. And well, we have to admit that the industry in the current economy doesn't share the same values. So how to stay critical when working with them, how to make sure that you collaborate without losing your identity, how to maintain an ethical position as well as remain relevant, catalytic, and critical, and what are the ramifications of entering the market and selling your work. When it comes to data protection, privacy, environment, NFTs, business models, the debate is vast and we want here to open it. So to do so, we have gathered today 3 projects, Vixx, Epoch, and Epoch, and 3 experts, Eva Pasco, Gillian, Boddington, and Camille. So I would like first to ask the 3 projects to present themselves in 2-3 minutes, and then I will introduce the panel of experts. And we will have a casual discussion on the topic, and we would be very happy also to hear from the audience if you have any comment or question. So Isaac Monte represents Vixx, a tech-driven wearable tailored to the aging population that enhances vital and beautiful living through preventing health monitoring. Isaac is fascinated by societal sustainability and interested in unusual new materials and how he can manipulate those. Isaac has been shown in variety of museums, galleries, and exhibitions. And his MIT project is now part of the permanent exposition in the Centre Pompidou in Paris. So thank you, Isaac, for being with us, and the floor is yours.
All right, thanks Aurélie for introducing me. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Isaac Monte, and together with InfoArt, I've been working on a project called Vixx. So Vixx is an art-driven innovation project, and it's really about healthy aging. What's special about it is that it's a low-tech, intuitive wearable device, and it empowers healthy and beautiful aging. So with this device, it gives control over your skin's exposure to UV radiation, the vitamin D uptake and vitality, while stimulating social interaction. So with this device, it shows that today's technology, or with today's technology, it's possible to generate a new type of interactive interface. It's intuitive, it's non-screen based, and it gives feedback to the user. And so it allows them to control on how to live a preventive lifestyle. So you don't need an app, you don't need screens, and you're not sharing your data with with the company that produced the device.
Thank you, Isaac. Thanks a lot. Next project is Echo's app, represented by Salomé Bazin. So Echo's app is a collaboration between King's College London, Cellule Studio, and Maastricht University. And Echo's is a new app which uses your smartphone's inbuilt microphone to record your heart sounds and a lot more that Salomé represents. So Salomé is a French designer and artist, founder of experiential design studio Cellule, who were founded in 2018, and her work with Cellule was showcased at the Science Gallery London, the Victoria and Albert Museum, Barbican Center and Sadler's Wells Theatre, and her studio got honorary mention from the Starts Prize Ars Electronica, among other awards. Salomé, thanks a lot. Up to you.
Thank you, Aurélie, for the introduction, and thank you for having me. I will represent Echo's team today. We are a team of designers, clinicians, computer scientists from the universities Aurélie mentioned, so that's King's College and Maastricht University. We started Echoes from a scientific question. We were wondering if we could hear heart sounds clearly from an iPhone microphone. So we created it to see if that could become a new diagnostic tool. But when we met with a group of teenagers in other charities of children with heart conditions, we realized that listening to heart sounds could also be used for much more, and that it could be very useful for stigma or even to just have fun with your own sounds. So our mission with Echoes is to unlock patient empowerment and human creativity by giving thousands of people the opportunity to record their heart sounds, and by giving artists and musicians the opportunity to creatively compose with those. So we've launched it, it's available in the App Store, and we are very excited on the next steps that will come in the improvement of Echoes as a clinical tool, but also as a new musical creation platform. That's it.
Thank you, Salomé. So the next and third project is Epoch Gallery, represented by Peter Wu from the US. So Epoch is an artist-run virtual gallery that functions as an inclusive community building platform, inviting established and emerging artists working in both digital and analog mediums to participate. So Peter generates artworks and immersive environments utilizing modeling and rendering software, projection mapping, 3D printing, and machine learning. And through speculative fiction, Peter investigates our estrangement associated with technological advancement and modernity. And during the pandemic last year, he founded and created Epoch. And his current show, Freeport, is the first entire virtual exhibition offered as an NFT, and the first to introduce an ecological, equitable, and sustainable model. Thank you, Peter, for being here. It's up to you.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. Hi, my name is Peter Wu. I'm an artist and the founder and creator of Epoch. Other than what you just mentioned, I guess the current exhibition is Freeport. To the date, there's 8 exhibitions that I've created since the pandemic. So it was the beginning of the pandemic when we started. Usually my approach is taking something architecturally that exists in the real world and then transferring and recreating it and remodeling it for this virtual world, and then curating artists into this space. This last show, Freeport, was the first show that we minted and created an NFT that's available on our own website, and it's on the Algorand blockchain, which is ecologically sustainable. And it's the first time that a smart contract that has been presented that that splits the profits between all the artists equally, and also the royalties are split equally in a way. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot for these wonderful and short presentations, which I think I have to congratulate you. And I'm sure our experts can't wait to ask you some questions, and I would like to introduce them briefly. So we have today the honor to have 3 experienced and outstanding women. So the first one I would like to present and give the word is Eva Pasco, who has pioneered e-commerce in UK as the first director for e-commerce for Arcadia Group. She has also developed fashion web shops for international fashion brands. And after a successful Crowdcube fundraising campaign for more than 1 million in 2017, Eva joined Blue Bella as a non-executive director overseeing the brand's digital acquisition and international e-commerce strategy. And since 2013, her e-commerce consultancy, The Retail Practice, has been advising the largest pan-European lingerie brand, OConnor. She has recently co-authored digital retail policy papers, and she regularly speaks at key retail industry events run by Retail Institute and runs a weekly digital innovations blog, The Retail's Bites, as steering the sector through the challenges of omnichannel. Eva, would you like to launch the discussion?
Hi. Thank you very much for your fantastic introductions. I was kind of expecting elevator pitches, but they were much better than that. So very, very excited. Great projects, all of them. And I can see that they're quite mature projects. They've been through the mill of initial innovation, and they've been through user acceptance. So this is really quite sort of scale up rather than a startup conversation. But as always, things probably can be improved. So if I can start from, I've got a few questions for Vixx. So you're holding the data device side, right? So in the question I had, which we discussed with the panel before, with the elderly, generally the data is shared with the carer. So if you can actually get the elderly to use the app, which in itself is quite a challenge, but if you can, then the person who monitors it is either the daughter or whoever is in charge. So if you're not sharing the data, then the only really person who can reflect on it is the actual patient. Would you consider adding the element of voluntary sharing if that was where you wanted to go?
Yes, because it was a very short pitch, I could not introduce all the different elements of the project. Right. What's actually interesting about it is that we developed something that we call the data donation register. So when you use a product or a device or a smart device nowadays, the only thing you can do is agree with the terms and conditions. Otherwise, the device doesn't work. What we do with Vixx is we turn it the other way around, and we have user-centered terms and conditions. So it's the user that decides with whom and what kind of data is being shared. And so we have several options. One of the options is to not share the data with anybody, just with the device itself. And as I explained, it's intuitive. So we have membranes opening and closing, things changing color. So it's only the user that can read it. However, we give the option to share this data with a caretaker, with the next of kin. And with this data donation register, we even go further, and we give the user the opportunity to share data, for example, with scientific researchers, because for them it's very valuable to have this data. And the most extreme is to sell your data to commercial companies. And that's what happens nowadays automatically. But with the data donation register, the user chooses it themselves, and they can even get paid for it. So the amount of data you share, the type of data you share, you can choose with whom you share it, and even get rewarded for it.
Great. Okay. So thank you very much. Yes, that makes it really usable up in ways more than one. So would the other panelists like to pick up and ask questions to Vixx?
Yeah, I had a question just to follow on. Would that mean you have some kind of training that you do with users? Because let's not stereotype, but oftentimes elderly people, either for some kind of physical ailment or otherwise, they're not necessarily very tech savvy or tech able. And so I'm wondering what thoughts you might have on some form of training for users, if you have thought of that.
So yeah, that's something that we took into account, that people on the one hand are fed up with technology and they are tired of screens. On the other hand, I also see with my grandparents that they are not very tech savvy. So we took that into account, and the way you read the feedback is very intuitive. So to give you an example, with Vixx, the device, you are being stimulated to take a certain amount of steps every day. And so the more steps you take, the more membranes open up, very comparable to a flower or to a sea anemone. So you don't really need training there. It is intuitive, and the wearer can see that the more steps he or she takes, the more membranes open up, and it functions like gamification and as a reward.
Thank you. Gillian, did you want to come in on this? We can't hear you.
So very impressed. Thank you for all three. As Ada said, advanced projects who have obviously been looking quite clearly at many of the issues that are pertinent in today's world, and even more so actually, I think, around the body as the interface, which is my key area of work since the COVID pandemic as well. So. But to follow on with, we'll follow on with Isaac, yeah, before we move to the others, I guess, as well. Although I'd like to possibly ask the similar questions. I wanted to ask one question, which was around the complexity of enabling wearables, because I think your creations are absolutely amazing and really incredibly beautiful. There's plasticity and the reaction of the plasticity within it, and the fact that this visualization of, you know, the internal side of ourselves is so important for science and understanding, for public communication of science. But what reactions have you had to the wearable side of it?
So I think, thank you very much for the compliments. I think what you have seen are videos and photos of Prosthetic X, and Prosthetic X is the preliminary research. Right. It's really the artistic project, and there we've been working on prosthetics or artificial organs, as you would call them. And we actually use that artistic research to discuss with our target audience, elderly, how do you read them? Are they readable? And they are built on a large scale, so they work very well as tools for communication and tools of reflection and to get feedback from the target audience. And yeah, we are actually in a startup phase. So we are currently making the translation from art project into wearable. That's also the way how we like to work. And the feedback is actually very nice from our target audience, because they have indeed links with nature, with flowers blossoming, with membranes changing color and those kind of things. So they are actually very positive about it. And now the challenge for us is to translate those bigger prosthetics and those bigger organs into smaller wearables and into smaller devices.
Now that's a great answer, and I think the nature side of it is very positive, and it much more that natural side of us being able to understand what's happening internally and understand it on the outside. So just, the other question I wanted to ask about was about I know you're at early stages, startup, but have you started to work on first pitches to investors, and what kind of response have you had? Because we are at a point in time where these kind of connected wearables and telemedicine scenarios and personalized bespoke tools are becoming more and more important. And I can see the investor community going towards it. And I was wondering whether you'd had any chance to present and what kind of responses were coming through and what maybe other things that are holding you back as well, not just them.
So of course we were enrolled in the STARS program, where we were prepared to pitch and to work on our pitch and to work on our project. What we got as feedback, so we didn't pitch yet because we are not ready to pitch yet. So we developed that art project, and now we have the first drawings and the first sketches into the translation into a wearable. And what we were missing, but what we are currently working on, is an alpha prototype. So the very first prototype as a proof of principle, which is bigger or is going to be bigger than the final device. But that is necessary to pitch it to investors so they can see how it works. It's a proof of principle. So we are in that phase now, and we hope to finish that in a couple of months, which will then allow us to approach investors.
Okay, fine. And then maybe we can come back later and to the investors stuff and talk more about some of the restrictions that do happen for all of us in these small projects or small beginnings of new businesses that are working with biometrics and personal data. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you for these first questions. Maybe before we continue with Salome or Peter, I would like to officially present you to Gillian. Present you Gillian Boddington. You already talked, but I would like to, to make things official. So Gillian, thanks a lot for joining us. You are an award-winning speaker, curator, and director specializing in the future human body responsive technology and immersive experiences. Gillian is a co-founder and creative director of Body Data Space, with a background in dance and performing arts and a long-term focus on the blending of our virtual and physical bodies. She engages in highly topical and future digital issues for our living bodies, including personal data usage, and sees a future in which we connect ourselves into a networked multi-self, an internet of bodies enabled by hyper enhancement of the senses and tele-intuition. I hope you can say more about this. Gillian is a co-presenter as a studio expert for BBC World Service Digital Planet, and is also a reader in digital immersion at the University of Greenwich. And her research explores the Internet of Bodies. So Gillian, maybe you want to continue and ask a question or make a comment on ECHOS?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. It was a rather long introduction. I think I should have given you something smaller. But anyway, from that introduction, you can see my long-term work, actually 30 years, is on the body as interface. So Salome, yes, wonderful. Yeah, to work with heartbeat. It's something that I played with in the 90s in very, very, very low lag situations in telepresence, transferring heartbeat between remote stages and trying to get that there, because the heartbeat is so much part of our belief in what is living, and also in terms of intimacy. So I'd like to actually talk to you a little bit about the same two things that I was talking to Isaac about. One was actually what reaction you've had from the body, from us as living bodies, you know, your test users as such, in relationship to attaching equipment, because I think it is one of the issues for the more complex biometric feedback scenarios, is the amount of attachment to the body. And also about whether you've had any discussions around investment in relationship to possible things that would be problematic. And I know also you are working between academia, arts and business, which is, as I am, and maybe a little comment on that and how you're finding that.
Thank you, yes. I'll try my best to answer all these questions. So the first one on the wearable, it's actually, so the initial question, so we know that heart sounds are we've worked on the heart sounds for various reasons, but for that particular reason, and it was to actually for diagnosis. So we know that the sound of a heart can give a lot of information about a condition, and it started from research at King's where they were wondering whether from a sound where they can know how well your valve is going and what stage are you at, and then to be able to predict when you need to have an operation. So it started from a very, very clinical question. And the clinical research was, can we actually do it without wearable? So can we actually do it from directly a microphone? So the entire sound research, the algorithm that we created was from the limit and the constraint of working directly from the phone, which is really hard. So this has been the hardest part, and we're not to a stage where we can scale up yet, but we've now got a database of 5,000 heart sounds. So we need to go further, but I think that was the number one question. But even with that, I think there were a lot of questions in UX, and because we're now working with, I feel like no one in the team is necessarily willing to let people, as at least for the clinical side, to be able to do it by themselves. I feel it's more of an addition and an opportunity to give, but we realize that the clinical expertise of knowing how to breathe, knowing how to position, knowing how to do all these things, there's a margin of error that's so huge. So the whole teaching and education seemed to be like a really, really important thing. So that was in the wearable. We still have constraint of access to phones because unfortunately all the Apple products are much better in terms of components. So we haven't got to that steps of being accessible for Android, for example, which seems like a small thing, but it's actually already such a limitation of demographics and access. And so this is what we're working on in the tech. I just want to say that also, I feel like there was a learning curve. I mean, as an artist, Gillian, you've seen it. We've worked with the heart for many, many other things. And this is the most business related quest that we have. But even so, as we've done it, we realized that the people actually wanted to really go down the route of creation, artistic exploration. There's so much about the heart that is a lot more than just clinical. So that really went alongside the project. In terms of investment, because, as you said, because we're working between academia, investment and art, we feel like we're trying to put everyone together, and we've got a lot of problem of intellectual property. How do we keep everyone happy, and how do we make sure we move progress together at a faster pace than universities do? So it requires a lot of trust between people and a lot of conversation and being very good in making our own terms so we can bypass the slowness of academia. So that's why, but I feel like we don't want to rush yet. We could go to investment, but we also feel there's a lot of opportunity with funding in science. So we want to get to that next milestone first.
Right.
Can I ask a quick question? So we've seen, because I do a little bit of UX for health apps as well. I'm aware of quite a few research projects that are using sound and speech AI and ML for diagnostic of mental health. So there is quite a lot of work in, microphone doesn't have to work that hard, nowhere near as hard when you have to pick up heartbeats as opposed to when you're picking up the speech. I haven't seen anything about from speech to heart, but I've noticed that speech is a very rich source of data, and the cadences and the rhythm within the same person can tell quite a lot. And everybody is very excited about the scope because there's a lot more data easily available. So maybe something worth looking at in parallel. If you are picking up the sounds of heart, is there another input that could be deployed with similar profile or similar diagnostic that could be quicker and get you there perhaps in a shorter time?
Exactly. And in terms of UX, I mean, where our part was to really try to go further from a medical interface, because we felt like it was very important. If we think of music and sound wave representation, there's so much symbolic around it that was a lot more attractive for people to So we've got this metaphor of that sphere, that bubble that is beating and pulsing, and it also helped doing the exercise of breathing before you actually record. But you're right. I mean, getting speech is a lot easier because that's what microphones were done for. So I feel there's so much more we can do in that supporting and accompanying the person in that process. We're very interested in slowness. So how can we allow everyone to self-reflect and understand what's going on inside? And the dream would be to manage a little bit better over the long time, knowing where your heart rate was more consistent or slower, because that definitely is connected with better health. So that's definitely something we could look for.
Right. So shall we hand over to Camille at that point? So do you want to introduce Camille?
Yes, of course I would. I was ready, you know. And I'm very pleased to introduce Camille because we have worked together for the last 2 years in the Start Ecosystem project. And I love the energy of Camille. She's an artist, a performer, researcher, a curator, a professor within various art forms. Participatory performance and interactive art, mobile media art, tech fashion, do-it-yourself electronics, responsive interfaces, and a lot more. And she develops methods and approaches to exploring the body within performance and interactive art contexts. She recently published a book, New Directions in Mobile Media and Performance, that showcases exciting approaches and artists in this space, as well as her own work. And she is also the principal investigator for UCA for our project Start Ecosystem and founder initiator for the EU Where Sustain project. So Camille, I'm sure you have some comments. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was trying to give space for everybody else because I can always talk. Before we go on to, we want to make sure Peter gets a moment as well. But I did want to jump in earlier and ask some follow-on questions, both to Isaac and Salome. First of all, I wanted to ask, kind of to follow on from Ghislaine's point around investors, and I'm kind of trying to steer it back to the idea of the critical dimension of artists. How will you ensure, or have you thought about ensuring, and this is, I guess, for all of you, if you get investment, that your investors will have the same values and concerns around, I mean, we didn't get into this with Salome yet, but I will, around data protection, or in terms of Isaac, your data donation register. How will you ensure that the investors will have your same values?
I think that's a very, very interesting question. But two of the core values of the whole project is, first of all, this intuitive feedback, because that's, super important in our project. And the other one is, of course, how we deal with data. So I cannot imagine to attract investors that don't support this idea, because this is the main idea of the whole project. I assume that investors or other companies that want to buy the idea would be interested in it if they don't share these values, if they have other ideas of how to deal with the data of the users.
Okay, well, I won't press too much, but I've seen it happen in other projects where teams had a particular vision, and then once they sold it, the company who took it over did what they wanted, and it wasn't at all in the same value. So I'm just curious about those thoughts. Does anyone else want to address that? I'm open to others thinking about that.
Yes, no, I think that that question also maybe Peter would be able to add to, because of it's maybe not about biometrics so much, but definitely about investment ethics in relationship to how you've set up Epoch. But it is, I think, probably one of the most unresolved dynamics that we're dealing with today, because the ethics that we all have at the base of our startups, is in a clash situation with the investment scenario around data privacy and personal data ownership. And we're seeing it hitting at levels all over the place, even in the big tech platforms. And, you know, just looking this week at the situation in Britain where we've got the gaming side has come in around age-appropriate gaming. A code has come into place, which means that you can no longer just harvest and grab UK children's data through any kind of social media, gaming or anything. And it doesn't matter if you're a non-UK company, you still have to adhere to that. So we're seeing shifts happening in the big tech companies in literally within 2 weeks, certain things happening. And maybe Eva's got stuff to add because she knows the corporate world much better than I do. But the hope is, of course, that those shifts will happen worldwide, not just for UK children. But Peter, you've probably hit this a lot in your work in relationship to not biometric data, but in actually how the NFT world works and blockchain and dealing with artists and buyers, etc. there too. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever money comes into play, it always complicates things. You know, when I first started this, it was very altruistic in a way, and everybody lost their exhibitions and their gigs and stuff like that. So I was like, well, let's start a virtual gallery and try it out. And it took off, but then a lot of people were approaching me and institutions also. And Epoch is quite a subversive project, so it really kind of tackles some issues which and I'm sometimes going against the institution itself or pointing out the fragility of the institution. So it's a difficult thing to try to work out with an institution like, okay, I'm not just a web designer for you, or I'm not just making a virtual thing for you. Like where does the balance between the creativity that I can provide to the project rather than you just being like, I just want to show like this. So anytime money definitely comes into play, it really kind of complicates things. And there has been an investor that has wanted to invest in Epoch, but I'm just like, I don't even know what you would do for me, because I mean, I'm pretty self-sustainable at this point because I mean, I have no overhead like a gallery and whatnot. So I really kind of function within this digital cave in a certain way. So, but it's just like, yeah, it's really quite complicated. So I am working with a major gallery in Los Angeles. I mean, a museum here in Los Angeles that's going to open a show in maybe July or February of 2022. But they are really allowing me a lot of creative control, and I think that's, for me, that's the only way for me to be able to do it. Otherwise, like, why would I make something for somebody else? I really do approach it really quite from an artistic point of view. So, and I really don't want to corrupt that. I'm pretty stubborn about not letting anybody kind of dictate how the project should go. So in that way, I wouldn't necessarily work with anybody that wouldn't align with the kind of the ethics and the ideas that I've been working with for this past year and a half. So.
Yeah, I really like that project. I have to say, it's brilliant to see so many women artists participating in your exhibition. I think it's going back to the early internet. You know, there was so many fantastic women designers like Hannah Gall and many others, because the space wasn't full of people overproducing. And I think an NFT space, particularly the way you approach it from the eco point of view, it's really great space for female digital artists. I was following Catherine Blake and Tove Lo, who issued the Digital Tits, I think, exhibition, which was hilarious. But it wasn't particularly eco-friendly, so it's nice to see that you're using Algorand platform to experiment. Yeah. If you want to go full green, I have a contact with very good fully hydro power data center in Sweden. I'm sure they would love supporting the project. So I think you'll find a lot of things.
That would be amazing. Yeah, Epoch, you know, if you're just looking at the scene of digital artists on NFT itself, it's really not representative of the kind of artists that I'm showing, which are basically women, queer, trans, and artists of color. That's the majority of everybody that the artists I show. So, and you know, just trying to give voice to those type of voices, and yeah, so. Yeah, and then being green, yeah, I chose Algorand because it was less destructive on the environment than Ethereum, and it seemed a little less money hungry and speculative in general. So that's what we went with.
Yeah, can I just ask a last question on the Algorand ability to support cross-chain interoperability? How far did they get with that? Because that would be probably the key.
Yeah, I'm not. I hear that they're trying to do it. There was an announcement at Christie's by Silvio that he was trying to do it. I don't see any progress in it. I think just cross-chain interoperability is quite difficult in general, especially when you have so many different smart contracts going on. And that's basically the issue. So, I mean, when you mint something on one blockchain, one marketplace, like say Superware or whatever not, it's really difficult to move that NFT to somewhere else, because of the smart contracts and their commission. Basically, it's a lot about the commission that they take that really stops everything from moving from anywhere else. It's that % of the commission in that smart contract that stops everything from going to another place. So,
it's more of an ambition rather than work in progress.
I think it's going to be happening. There's just got to be a lot more variables that have to be in place that to allow that flexibility. And I built a smart contract that is very, very complex, that is difficult to for these marketplaces to kind of adopt, and so I'm working with a lot of marketplaces to see if they can accommodate such a complex smart contract, because it's more equitable when you can split the profits between not just yourself but between an organization, maybe a charity or whatever not. So you can donate some of the stuff that you get to wherever these things go. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
It feels like it's a bit of the Wild West that you're entering, Peter. And I'm wondering, because I know I've talked to people who say, I don't really know enough about this to get involved in it, and I've been doing digital art in this other way. How do you engage with the artists on this and help them understand what you're doing?
About maybe 60% of the artists I work with don't have any digital skills, so they've never maybe done a model or anything. So I really work with them really closely to kind of help them realize their vision. So we talk concepts a lot. We talk about ideas and what the possibilities of what I can do on my platform. And then we, sometimes when you give an artist, like, you don't have the restrictions of monetary or scale, and then sometimes they try to create something that's not really like their work. So I try to keep them focused on what their work is, and then trying to translate it for this space and working within this new context, because I'm not working within white walls. It's within an architectural space. So and so when I'm approaching it with the artists about the NFT, I'm not minting individual works. What I'm doing is minting the entire exhibition. So the entire exhibition is a compilation of all the artists' work. That's what you're getting as an NFT. So it skirts a lot of issues with putting pressure on one artist's work or one artist's reputation to support a gallery, and it's more of a kind of a communal and a community-based kind of effort, and we're all kind of trying to support each other and get these things off the ground. And then the profits are split. So 70% goes to all the participating artists, 30 stays with the gallery. There's royalties set in, and there's also an AP edition that goes to all the artists at the end of the exhibition, so they can kind of maintain the value later on. Yeah, but several have sold already, so it's been going well. It's and Algorand itself has skyrocketed within the last week. So everybody seems pretty happy with that part.
Yeah, it's a very interesting comment on meritocracy in a way, because you're basically taking a view that each of the contributors is equal. And, in my experience, that doesn't necessarily work for the artists, because obviously there is always an anchor artist, and there is, supporting stages, and it's fine because people develop that over a period of their artistic life when they move from being a support act to being the first act. But it's nice to see that there is an option if a cooperative wanted to act together in a truly ultimate.
I think a lot of the artists that I work with, especially that are participating in the NFT part, they really kind of, if they are more successful or have a better reputation in the art world, they really kind of understand that this model is something that is lacking in the art world, and they are trying to support it as they're seeing it as more equitable in general. So it's they've been really they've all been on board and really want to kind of support this kind of idea, and they want to see this happen in other kind of in more mainstream galleries or whatever not. So so it's not really happening. So I'm pretty much a little unicorn over here.
Yeah, I think it would be very daring and novel to do this in a physical gallery as well, and see how to get all the artists on board to agree to sharing all the profits. Because I can imagine that then you also get more effort from all the artists in promoting the gallery, promoting the work. Then it's more like a group effort. Yeah. But then I question, what's the role of the gallerist? And do the artists become gallerists as well?
No, that I thought that would be the case, that they would, but I'm actually working a lot harder trying to promote these things, and I, trying to I'm an artist, so putting an art dealer hat is quite difficult for me. So, but I have to do it at certain occasions and have to do it at certain times. So I am, even though the model is like, yes, we're kind of sharing it equally on social media and whatever not, but I have to strategically think about how to approach things. Where can we take things further? What other avenues? Because like when I first approached it, I'm like, okay, we're going to try to sell some NFTs, but then I realized the people on Ethereum are not going to go to Algorand, so I have to go more tap the Algorand people, because the Ethereum people are more like, they're on their own world and their own kind of space, and they don't really want to venture this. So there's like these little kind of tribes that are happening that you have to try to figure out. And when I'm in the situation, I have to kind of think about the whole kind of spectrum of it, and how, and that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So it's not necessarily the artist trying to sell the work, which hasn't necessarily happened. Although other promotions, when it's shared, then people hear about it, and then that's when sometimes sales happens, But
and it also feels like it's a bit of the debate when you ask that question, Camille, of how do you protect something between the collective and the private? So who holds who holds the project, and where is the data stored? And I feel like all these questions it's very hard. It's a very hard question, because I feel like all of us in this room would prefer like this collaborative sort of open source, everyone has access to it because it's suddenly more democratic. But then you've all these questions of data protection and then legal rights of usage. Where is it stored? What country is it in? And I feel this is a very hard question to answer.
So I've been working with Uncopied. So Elian was also in the Starts in Motion project. That's where I met him, and he was working on the Algorand. So I partnered with him to create the NFT, and I've been working with him very closely on several other projects. But what's really unique about his project is that he has these certificates that are accompanied by legal agreements, so that all the artists and everybody, and even the collector, really knows what their role is in the situation, so there's not a lot of confusion in it. And I worked with a lawyer that was very close with me, and we really had the language really kind of not very in lawyery language, but very kind of something that's very understandable. Because when I first saw the contract that she drafted, I was just like, well, I wouldn't sign that because I don't understand anything about it. So then we had to really pare it down, like, okay, I understand this. This is something that's very clear. I think artists would be on board. And then I passed it to the artists to make sure that they were like, okay, this is understandable. Like, yeah, this is amazing. So that's how the process kind of goes. And storing it currently the IPFS, it's on IPFS, but there's some different nodes and whatever not. And who owns it? Yes, it's me that owns it, as in it's minted under Epoch as a token. But in the smart contract, it's literally split between all the artists participating artists' wallets. So essentially, they are all part ownership of the project. So,
and I feel like one last comment I want to add, because I feel maybe Isaac and I were in this situation where we're holding, it's like public data because it's health data. So
yeah,
suddenly the state is involved. I mean, we're working with public institutions, which is a great protection. And I feel like there is such a hunt and a thirst for biometric data. We can see it coming. We started as an art project and it was fine. No one was bothering us. But now we're having all these people coming and having to be very cautious of who is dealing the contracts, from where there's been like a huge problem with the NHS. There's some data storage being in the US. And I feel like this is.
I'm personally very weary of bigger corporations because they usually don't have your best interests in mind, and usually they take your tech, and they really kind of they use it for things that they kind of step over you and on you and to try to make it happen. And usually when something that's kind of started with really altruistic kind of intentions, you know, sometimes and we see in technology wise, they kind of get corrupted and used for other different ways that you didn't intend. So that's something that we have to be conscious of and have to think about, and theoretically and critically, and how we can position that. And maybe, so it's
and even public institutions, because a lot of them aren't always
exactly. There's this like
true though. It's true what Salome says, though, that in academia, at least, you have to go through your data ethic committees, you've got to get the sign off, you've got to do proper consent and reconsent even, actually, if your data wants to be used again by another project, you know, etc. I'm working at the moment, actually, with Northumbria University on this One Cell at a Time, part of the Human Atlas project, which is really interesting around this. It's about the body data, but what we agree to donate or not is part of that discussion, physically as well as digitally. Yeah, so you know, your heart, your eyes, your whatever else, and the complexities of that. But academia does, to a large extent, template and support consent and reconsent, and has to be very careful about data use. But we know as soon as that goes into the business sector, there are many businesses that just are not thinking like this at all. So Salome said, we say this before, I always advise that cooperative groups and people who are looking possibly towards something which might be a startup, actually right at the beginning make a kind of, the word mission is wrong, but a kind of group statement, a couple of paragraphs around the co-ownership side right from the beginning. If this is co-owned, it's co-created, who's doing what, etc. But also around, a group understanding statement around data privacy and around sustainability. And that actually, if those group statements change as the group goes along, fine. But if they need to be changed as a group, not just changed by one person who suddenly goes, I think we should just go for this, whatever, even though we did say we were going to be sustainable. And we are seeing now quite a lot of the medical and health tech groups, SMEs, of which there are many in the femtech scene, particularly in the intimate tech side, also in implants and medical implants, beyond wearables, a deeper side, really starting to come up with quite clear data privacy and ownership, like you're talking about very well, Isaac, with your decisions on opt-out, etc., right up front on their websites, because that's where the customers want it. Because we're here, what we're dealing with is what do investors want against what do the public want. And this is, again, an unresolved scenario, but we can see with the NHS here, 2.5 million people signed out of being able of the government being able to share our GP information with corporates in May and June alone. It took 6 weeks and 2.5 million people opted out. Quite hard to opt out. You have to find the place on the website, but and they've now suspended that whole scheme because they realized there was so much not good feeling. Contact tracing apps the same, problematic.
Yeah.
Vaccine passports, problematic.
If I can stick up for the business world, the public tells you one thing, but does something completely different. So I have issued many apps where we gave people a little bit harder work to do, because if you don't gather data, the convenience drops. But the second they realize that, they would just say, just take the data, because people have no interest in doing any work whatsoever. And if they have to remember any frigging password one more, they just goodbye. So you have to be realistic, not just the investors. It's us, the public. We have two hats. One is that, no, don't touch my data. And the other one, really, I just want you to know everything about me, because I want you to solve all my problems without me having to think about them. And that goes quite deeply to our sense of humanity. So there's no point being self-righteous about it. We're dealing with humans. We're not dealing with ideas. We're not dealing with utopias. If you want to help people, you've got to cut through the bullshit and see what really helps people. Because I can tell you, I've experimented many times with trying to block, Chrome and Google cookies, and then lasting about 48 hours, not being able to do anything, and then crawling back and groveling, please let. So, we haven't solved it. The solution is not to log the data and let the people, remember every single password for everything forever. The solution is figure out with the technologists a way of doing it safely. We can't rely on the governments, because the governments, they just want the big tech to do well because they get tax from them. So the government are never going to get too interested. And you can see in UK, we're already breaking up GDPR everywhere. Mm-hmm. But GDPR was never a good solution anyway. People just clicked on, yes, please, cookies anytime, do whatever you want, just give me the content, give me the product, give me the use. So we have not moved. So I think for you as artists, the sensitivity has got to be based on reality. What if you want to help? How?
I do think that both Isaac and Peter have put forward models today. Isaac on the opt-out, choose what to opt into, which I actually work with myself. We look at personal data dashboards, and the choice up front to opt out or to choose what you give data to whom and whether you want to charge for it or not, or you want to give it for free for medical research. That wouldn't be a very hard thing for everyone to have personal data dashboards up front. We're not stupid. We're asked to go back into deep levels of T's and C's, which is what Peter brought up. Actually, T's and C's and contracts, etc., which are understandable and which are publicly we're able to take on board. So the demystification and the simplification of understanding how we deal with these T's and C's and these data privacy situations is not that hard. It just actually doesn't suit the corporates to do that. They want to keep it harder, so they keep gathering data. Yeah. And I think with the biometric side, things like the Heart Project, the heartbeat of Salome stuff, is where we all feel it so much, because it actually becomes so intimate and so about the self, because the heart has that metaphor as well as the science around it. So.
And I just want to add that because we can see the future, and of course, it's probably going to be one of the most valuable data. I mean, having access to tens of thousands of this is to anybody. If that go through is not protected well, I mean, that's gold for so many purposes. So I'm very aware of that, and I feel like we almost need to be helped. Like we're not going to know all the possible consequences of this filtering through and going to the wrong hands. And yeah, it's sometimes a little scary, but yeah.
It's scary, but you want to feel good about yourself when you're 80. So that's where my line lies. Yeah, many decisions in my life, it's just like, am I going to be able to live with this when I'm 80? So it's like...
I mean, I think it's great what Peter did is put it back to the artists and find what, because they'll always be really critical, and they can help you figure out these all possible things that can go wrong. And that idea of the speculative, I picked up on earlier that you said, Peter, around speculative fictions. I mean, put that out to some artists of your Heart Project and ask them, what are the speculative fictions of my technology in terms of the good and the bad? Because I think that can really generate some interesting potential bad outcomes, potential good outcomes that you hadn't considered that could really help. And I just wanted to add also that I think Isaac has invented, or maybe not the first person, I don't know, but is implementing this idea of the data donation register, which we were talking about the other day when we were preparing for this, not that particular thing, but that idea of giving customers or clients or whomever or users the ability to sell their own data instead of having companies make money off of our data. I think it's an overdue idea, and I hope you do well with it, and I hope more organizations go forward with that. Why should other people make money on our data?
Exactly, and the standard nowadays is to opt out, but the standard should be to opt in. And that should be the starting point. Like, do I want to share? And also what Peter does, make it understandable to people. Because what's the reason that we just click yes? It's because it's pages and pages and pages of text. And they even give you the option, scroll to the bottom, so you can skip all the legal, non-understandable language. It's done on purpose.
Yes, it is.
Really feels like a natural conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to jump to say that it would be maybe the final word. So I want to thank all of you, Isaac for Vixx, Salome for Ecos, Peter for Epoch, and our experts, Gillian Boddington, Eva Pasco, and Camille Baker, for having given us at least some tracks on how to stay critical when working with the industry as an artist. And personally, you know that I love to accompany you and see your project, so keep up with the good work, and keep up with proposing new solutions always. And thank you for this. And I would like also to thank our audience for following this session. Have a good rest of festival all, and I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.